welcome to the Resinator's Conquest Podcast. I am your host, the Resinator. This is what I'm calling episode 0, because it's kind of an introduction to me, how I got into Conquest, and basically what this podcast is going to be about in the coming weeks. So, who am I? I'm the Resinator. My real name is Francisco Quesada. I actually go by Q, Francisco, Cisco. I have a lot of actually nicknames that I go by. The Resinator is one that I got because right around COVID, when COVID hit, which is basically when I got into Conquest, I actually started my own 3D printing business, and I call it the Resinator since I'm only doing resin printing. And, you know, I started with that name, and I've been sticking with that right now for pretty much all of my social media stuff, you know, whether I'm doing the 3D printing, doing the painting, now doing videos, podcasts, and everything, and I pretty much think I'm going to stick with it. It's a fun name. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want to be the Resinator? You know what I mean? It's a fun name. There's a lot to play with it and, you know, I've got logos now, and I've got a whole branding behind it. We'll see how far that goes. So how did I get into Conquest? I was at my local game store, and it happened to be a game castle here in Sacramento. And I just happened to see this game called Conquest sitting on the shelf, and they had these big bundles. And it was a starter pack with these 2 extra regiment packs, you know, bundled in all together for one price. And I started looking online just to double check and see, you know, had the Parabellum, who was the, you know, makers of Conquest, they had the same kind of bundle going on, where you got your starter box, which was the 100 Kingdoms versus the Spire, and then you got 2 free regiments, where the Marksman clone, and it was a Steel Legion. I really love the aspect of those Steel Legion and on the mounted knights, household knights that are, you know, they just looked really aesthetically cool. To be very honest, I didn't think that the Spire would look that cool, but, you know, they was part of the, you know, the starter box. And with the savings of those extra regiment boxes of, you know, $50 each pretty much, I think they came out to like $45 plus tax. I was like, that's a good savings. I mean, why not do that with all these models? They're a little bit bigger models than I'm used to as well. I started in 40K when I started my miniature kind of career, or playing career. And so I'm used to like 32 millimeters. And it was just kind of nice to have something bigger to work with, to play around with. So I was like, cool, let me buy this box. And I bought the box and started putting my 100 Kingdoms together. You know, I put the whole box together, but I really wanted my 100 Kingdoms. And I wanted to put those Steel Legion together and the Household Knights. And I started, you know, buying some more pieces here and there. And at the time when I first started, the pandemic hit, and so I actually really couldn't go to stores and play. So I was really able to start piecing my guys together and painting them. I'm a little bit of a slower painter, so it took me a while to, you know, get stuff painted. And then I started buying more and more regiments. And then I was looking at the rules, and I was like, man, it'd be kind of fun to play with Sakari. It'd be kind of fun to play with the household, the guard at the time. But at the time I first started playing, those weren't actually released. Sakaris are still not released yet, which I'm really waiting for them to be released. So I actually 3D printed my own, you know, guard, and then Sakari. The guard, you know, the guard came out pretty quickly, so I, you know, ended up having to kind of not use those, because once they were out, I really couldn't use the 3D printed models, you know, that I wanted to use. I still use them here and there, but I tried not to, and I ended up buying, you know, the regiments so that I had the actual models. But like the Sakari, I still have, you know, I think 2 regiments of 3D printed Sakari that I'm still use when I want to use Sakari. So, you know, I just started building up more and more. I ended up buying a couple pieces for the Spire as well to kind of flesh out that little bit of the Spire side of the army. And that's basically where I started. From there, it just kind of blew up. I really got hooked on some of the other armies. The Living World got me hooked on, you know, voting for the new factions, voting for what's going to happen with certain characters. And then also, it really just got me hooked on, like, looking at the different armies. And then when I was online, I found out that Parabellum had a Vanguard program. And I was like, you know, I really like this game. Let's try and see what that Vanguard program's all about. And that Vanguard program's kind of basically about, you know, setting up demos and showing people how to play the game, doing digital content, you know, just repping the game in general. And so I applied to be a Vanguard, and I became a Vanguard of the game. And I was like, well, you know, if I'm going to be a Vanguard, and if I'm going to, like, demo games for people and show people how to use the games, I might as well start collecting all the armies. So I started collecting all the armies. I really liked the Nords and their monsters. So I got, the trolls. I couldn't wait when those first came out. They looked so fun, and who doesn't like the regen that they have? Especially unless Argument of King, their regen is ridiculous. And they're pretty strong in general. So those models were really cool, and my whole Nords army, I kind of wanted to do just monsters. So I wanted to have the giants, the trolls. When werewolves come out, I want them. I have the Fenrir packs. I didn't really want to use the Raiders and the Huskarl, even though the Huskarl, I love the whole outfit that they have and their shields. While they're kind of big and beefy and they kind of get in the way of putting them on the stands, they're just super awesome. They have very cool, aesthetically pleasing shields, and they're fun to paint. The Raiders are also really fun to paint, especially all their skin tones and working with that. But so from Nords, I kind of quickly went over to the Wadroon when they started seeing more pieces of those come out, especially those Raptor Raiders. I don't have my Raptor Raiders even closely finished, because when I started painting them, I was like, the skin tone that I used for those, I actually used for the Nords. And I'm like, I didn't want to have the same kind of skin tones of, the different factions. So I had to rethink about how I wanted to paint my, the Raptor Raiders. And so I'm kind of halfway in between painting those, because I still don't know how to finish the skin tone that I want yet. I'm still deciding on that, really. But all the feathers, I've worked on some of the feathers already, and they're just, they're so fun to work with. And for me, I don't like to do a lot of dry brushing, because I like to actually apply paint where I want it and only where I want it. And so I tend to, do a lot of brush stroking on stuff like that. And while it's tedious, it's a lot of fun when you finish it and you see all this cool coloration that you purposely put exactly where you want it. So that's kind of how I like to do it. So I got into the Wadroon, started playing with them, and I actually voted for, in the Living World, I voted for the Old Dominion. So when those came out, I got hooked on them, and I just started getting those. And I'm actually working on probably finishing that army more so than I am even the 100 Kingdoms. Because I kept buying pieces, and I'm like, I'm mostly done with painting, the whole army. But, I still got some basing to do, some detail work to do, and, the final clear coating of that army too. But I've actually really just kind of focused on the 100 Kingdoms, the Old Dominion, because I just like them better at the moment. I'm having more fun with them. The last faction I actually got was the Dwagam, and it's nothing to do with the Dwagam in general. It's just that before I got into Conquest, I was 3D printing, and I 3D printed hundreds of dwarves, painted dwarves, did a painting competition about these, and it was just I was kind of overdoing that for a little while. And so it was just kind of the last step of, just trying to fill in and getting everything, all the armies, was getting the Dwagam. So I do have a small Dwagam army now that I'm working on, getting up to par. Basically, I have just a First Blood army, really, because I have 2 regiments and 3 regiments and the Hold Ray. So I don't have a lot for them right now, but I will be looking forward to getting the Drake, sooner or later, and Sorcerer and some other pieces to fill out the army and have a full 2,000 point Last Argument of King army. Because like I said, right now I just have the First Blood. So I have a First Blood of all the factions, and I have at least all the factions except for Dwagam. I have a 2,000 point Last Argument of King army already for them. So I feel like I'm in a good shape to demo models. I still need to get them all painted, but at least I can demo and show people how the games work and show people the actual models when I do those demos. So from there, I've been growing my army and, painting it and, showing it on Instagram, showing it on my YouTube channel, showing it on Facebook, everywhere I can, spreading the word around, trying to do demos in my local stores. And then I got this opportunity to actually go to the Las Vegas Open, LVO, and help the Parabellum team in their paint room. So they were sponsoring the paint room there, and they needed somebody to actually just go in there and paint and, show them the models and stuff like that. So I said, yeah, no problem. I'd be happy to go. I decided to help them out, and I went out to Vegas, and I didn't know really what to expect, but I knew that I was going to be, teaching basically how to paint Steel Legion. And I was like, great. So I got some Steel Legion all readied up, got them all primed how I wanted them, and, got all my paints set up, and, went out there. And the first demo I had was such a fun experience. And they only had one scheduled for me for each day. But I was like, I'll just come back later in the day and do a second one. And ended up doing a second one, and those were all successful. each time I, was around, there was, a handful of people around me learning how to paint, learning either for the first time or learning some of the techniques that I use to help paint my Steel Legion, just different techniques and stuff like that. And so I got a lot of people exposed to painting, at least Steel Legion, and then I decided to actually paint some Raiders because they had them on the table there for paint and take. And so I was like, well, I'll just show some people how to do skin tones, at least how I do skin tones, I do a lot of layering, and I usually start from the dark to light and then do layering upwards to my brights. And some people don't know how to even do like any kind of layering or any kind of techniques to do anything of shading. And so just some techniques like that was really helpful to some of these people, and they really enjoyed those little lessons I had given those people. So it was awesome also that I got to spend time with the Parabellum team and the creators of the game. If you ever get a chance, I'd highly recommend stopping off at one of their booths and talking to them, getting to know them. They are great people. They love games. They love this game of Conquest, and they're really into listening to the community and working with the community to make this game the best game it could possibly be. So if you ever get a chance, I would highly recommend meeting them. Go to their booths whenever you see them at a convention. They're great people. So I got to do that. In the middle of doing that, on the last day of the convention, they had these mounted squires that they were just showing, and they were not quite released. They were going to be released, I think, that next month. And they had a few of those sitting out for display, but they were just, gray plastic. And I was like, well, I'm sitting here for a little while. Let me just paint this, And so I ended up painting one. And the real reason I wanted to paint it, and the one that I chose, it had a big rose on its shield. And I was like, man, that rose is going to be really fun to paint. And so I just sat down and painted the rose and painted the whole night, finished painting the whole night. It's not a night, a mounted squire. And, had that, and I had some pictures. I'll probably post them right here just to show you. That was a great time I had with the team of Parabellum at the Las Vegas Open. If I ever get a chance, I would definitely go back and help them out with other tournaments, painting classes, whatever. I would be more than happy to help. Conquest, I still plan on growing my personal armies to make them bigger. Like I said, I want at least 2,000 points of every army. I would like to have probably the main characters of every faction. And then when they start coming out with some of the retinues, I think I really want those too, because in the First Blood, which I am starting to like a little bit more than Last Argument, which I like both a lot, but we'll get into that later too in a different episode, First Blood versus Last Argument of King. I would like to get the retinues for all the different factions, because they are going to be kind of more important to playing First Blood, having their own retinues and different models to distinguish those from the actual models of, like, let's just say the Mori or the Legionnaires, the Praetorians, or something like that, because that's what I'm using right now especially for the Old Dominion. I'm just using different guys from the different regiments, the ones that look a little bit different, in order to say that they're part of the regiment of my character. And so I definitely want characters of all the different factions, regiments of all the different factions, and then a spattering of different models here and there of everything. So I'm excited to see where we're going here in the future, and where Parabellum's going in the future. I will always enjoy listening to their happy hours, and enjoy seeing the previews of what's coming next. So we'll see what that leads us. And because they're still new and this game is still new, that means this podcast has a lot of room to grow still. When the new factions come in, we'll start talking about those. And so this podcast is going to be about Conquest. That's it. We're going to talk about everything from Last Argument of King, First Blood. If they ever make a different game mix in with this, we'll talk about that as well. We will eventually start talking about lore, but not for a little while. My plan is to first start off with all the factions, explaining some of the factions and the rules, mechanics behind them, and some of the pieces that I like and I've seen that I've played with or played against on the different factions. And then from there, we'll probably go into some of the rules difference between First Blood, Last Argument, and then from there we'll probably start getting into lore and do lore. But it's all going to be Conquest, whether it's gameplay, hobbying, painting, the new models are coming out, previews, anything like that. Lore, we will be doing lore. We will be following that. We'll be following, conventions. Anything that that's Conquest related is going to be here, and we'll be talking about it. I do plan on having guests. I already have one planned. Hopefully it'll be for the Spire video, faction video, but we'll see. I'm talking with her right now to see if we can get her for that video. But for right now, plan on the next coming episodes are going to be faction specific. I'm going to start off with the 100 Kingdom, which is going to be the first faction that I started off with. So that's going to be our next video. And again, this is going to be Conquest. You can check out my channel on YouTube. There is some painting videos. I'm going to start doing more live streaming of just painting Conquest models and painting models in general. Because I do a lot of painting. I paint pretty much every day. At least I try to. There's some days, it gets really busy. I do have a full-time job and try to do 3D printing business and, try to take care of my dog and house and everything else at the same time. So it does get a little complicated, and there will be times when I won't be able to get things done right away, but I promise you this, we're going to continue on with this. This is going to be a great podcast coming up, and I'm excited for the future. All right, just one last thing. Sorry to all you folks that were expecting this. This was supposed to be out last week. Unfortunately, I originally recorded all this in the wrong format, and I spent a week trying to, convert it and trying to make it work, and it just didn't want to work. So I ended up having to just re-record this. So this is my second attempt at recording episode 0. And I did bring these posters down because they were way up here, so you can only see the bottom half of or not even the bottom half, about a quarter of these posters. So I brought them down so you can see them better. And I'm working on finishing up the intro, which I had a little bit of problems, technical issues with doing that as well. So it's all done now. I'm excited that I got the intro done. I'm excited that now this is going to be filmed and filmed correctly so that I can actually edit it and put it up there for you guys. And we'll see you in now 2 weeks to get the next episode, episode 1. It's going to be about the 100 Kingdoms, so look forward to that.